We're live. We are live. We're putting the jelly beans away. Okay, we are back. And we're gonna hear from Alan Gilbert. Alan, come on up. Just tell us a little bit about, I know you have a lot of involvement with it. So whatever you can tell us, and then tell us what you think.
I did send in a testimony, said you should be access, and then if you have it.
Should be up here.
I do have paper copies if anyone needs it.
It is. Yes, it is on, but it is on the committee site, and if you can, we can let you share your screen, and now we can just let you go.
Yeah, there's nothing on the screen that's any different than what you can see, so.
Okay.
So my name is Alan Gilbert. I was chair of the Worcester School Board when it joined the Brigham litigation, which was in 1995, brought by a team of 5 attorneys supported by the ACLU Vermont. And the lead attorney in that case was
Bob Ginsberg.
Bob Ginsberg. I just blind completely. You were staring at me and I thought, you know. I was the chair of the Worcester School Board at the time. I was chair also of the Washington Central Supervisory Union School Board. And I was also a few years after that president of the Vermont School Boards Association. So I had my to run the education work. Following the Brigham decision, I was active in the nonprofit organization that was led by former Governor Phil Hoff that was supporting the Brigham decision to try and make that as easy as possible for people to understand and also accept and see the benefit of what the board had done. And then my last employment was as executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Vermont. I'm now retired, have been since 2016. When Worcester signed on as a plaintiff in the Brigham case, our town was a really good example of the unequal access to education opportunities because of a minuscule property tax base. This is, every time I say this to people, they laugh and they say this can't be true. But the biggest taxpayer in town at the time in Worcester in 1995 was the telephone company. And it was for the polls that came through town. Things were made worse financially because nearly half of the town is state forest land, making that exempt from property taxes as well. Those of us in the school board recognized that all this when we tried to pass a relatively small bond to add classrooms, a library, kitchen, and space for staff to work with IEP students out of school. The state was threatening to close the school because we weren't meeting facility standards that were being used at it. It took us 3 tries after trimming of the plan each time to pass the bond. I say this as an example of the importance of property tax wealth in children's educational opportunities. It's why my town joined the lawsuit. I watched closely the discussions this legislative session concerning reconfiguration proposals. My prime interest has been protecting the financial equity created by the Brighams. H 454's financial mechanisms build around the foundation formula, which ironically is the very mechanism that led to an unconstitutional label by the Vermont Supreme Court in 1997. But I've heard numerous times in the past few months that Brigham's equity is flawed in practice. Towns can just as well spend less on students' education as they can spend more. It's a town decision. Since the state is responsible for ensuring equitable funding for all students, and since equitable funding wasn't happening, the state needed to establish a guaranteed minimum per pupil amount foundation formula that provides a solid education. Essentially, what we are doing by discussing this and maybe putting it into action, we're acknowledging that we have been blind in pounds year after year, spend low to keep school taxpayers down. I'm sorry, to keep school taxes down in order to avoid budget defeats and holes. All in all, if one puts aside the ever-present danger of the state not over time fully funding the foundation formula, the plan and for 5-4 looked pretty impressive. A speed bump placed in front of excess spending, the town can spend no more than 10% above the foundation amount and only at the state's lowest town's tax capacity. Well, that will help slow excess spending and provide funds for school maintenance and construction around the state. Will the finance mechanism in H454 work? Indeed, that's a key question. And the answer is it can work if, and this is the big if, the legislature can adhere to its responsibility of keeping the foundation amount in line with inflation. If it can't, we're going to be back where we were in 1997. My testimony, happy to take questions.
Okay, questions, somebody?
Thank you. And I agree with your testimony, but I wondered, there is one, the difference between the formula that's proposed in the bill and what there was in 1995 that led to Brigham is, I think one big difference. There are a lot of differences, I think, between that foundation formula and this, but one of the big differences I think John just went over in his presentation was there was local and state tax, and it put most of the onus on raising on just an individual single community. So Worcester had to raise all the money for the Worcester school, and this proposal would keep with the current system in the sense that it would be statewide, state raised. Everybody would have to pay into the education fund that then would fund the foundation formula for Worcester. So I do think that is a big difference between that foundation formula and this, but I do agree 100% that unless the legislature is disciplined enough to continue to keep up with the inflationary increase to what is deemed to be the adequate amount for the foundation formula, that we'll get ourselves back into that. And an adequate 100% of that foundation amount as well.
Yeah. My experience in 1995-97 during the Brigham litigation, I just became completely unable to even consider ever again living in a place that had a foundation formula because the Vermont one was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me a long time this year and listening to all the discussion in the committees to even begin to accept the notion that maybe you can have a successful foundation formula that's right for kids, and also is fair to the taxpayers who are paying this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 454 has actually hit that spot. Because, really, what the state is about to do is to take on the funding of education and the distribution of money for education in the state. There will be no more budget votes unless you can do an excess amount and you have to get a vote of the town to do that. But people are not going to be discussing budgets the way we've done it for 200 years. We're not going to be sitting around and saying, gee, do we really have to have that extra set of Shakespeare in the library? Do we really have to have hot meals for our kids? Do we really have to have 2 levels of math for 6th graders because some of them can't make it over to the high school levels? I don't think we've all really, it hasn't really hit us up, let alone how schools physically we're probably going to be moved, and children will be moving in very different places and their families in terms of following activities after school and all that. I think the state taking over, basically being the main entity that does all the finance work, both in terms of collecting the money and distributing it in a way that is supposed to be equitable. It's going to be a real challenge. it's gonna be a challenge for us to get used to it, and it's gonna be a challenge for the state to continue to keep up doing what 454 wants us to do.
And so can I follow up with another question? So given that, I completely agree, and I think that most people have not, including me, you know, had it fully sink in the sort of full weight of what is being proposed. But given that, and given our current system and the inadequacies that have grown in our current system over the last number of years, do you think moving in this direction is the right way to go, or would you try to tweak the current system and the current formula instead?
I think it all depends on the trust that we all, either as legislators or the public, thinks the state will keep to its promise that it will keep adjusting the funds as inflation comes along or other costs come along. But the towns are not going to be able to do that the way they have in the past, because it's the state that's going to be doing all that. And unfortunately, the results of what most states in this country eventually end up against, and so many of them do have foundation formulas, is they don't keep up with inflation. And slowly and steadily, we get more and more behind. Before you know it, you're back where we were in 1995, where there were, I mean, the disparities that were horribly, you know, they were 100% of the ability of one town to raise taxes over another. So I think it all depends on what we as a people, acting as the government, will do in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Because we really want this to work, we've got to put our money in. You know, I was listening to Senator Brock yesterday where you were saying we have to do something about spending. You know, we talk about cutting spending or doing this or doing that, and we don't do it. We don't do it, or we don't grasp what it really means. You know, what the impact's going to be. And I am very concerned about that. But
what do you mean about that? About the impact of what that means?
One of the biggest problems you're facing now is one the governor has talked about from the very beginning, and it's just a great way to make people nervous about what's happening, and that's when they can't understand how the system works. And you know, frankly, I think the current system, I mean, I've known that system, and I used to do public. I was part of a group of people who went out and would explain the different towns and districts when they wanted to know how Act 60 worked. I was one of the people who would explain how, you know, how the rebates, prebates worked, and how the money was now pooled and all this other stuff. I'm having trouble following some of the things that are being proposed now in terms of understanding. And it could be because I'm getting up there in age, and I don't profess to have the same mind I did 30 years ago. But I'm thinking that, you know, if I'm having trouble following this stuff, I don't think a lot of other people are going to be able to follow it either. And I even something that might be the right thing to do, like 454, which I do think is the right thing to do. It's going to be really hard, I think, to sell it, especially if enough people know what foundation formulas and other places always end up as, and that's a train wreck because the legislature, the governor, whoever, just doesn't put the money that you've promised when you do a foundation formula. You make a pledge that you have to keep the money up to keep the system working the way it should. Otherwise, you're hurting children. And that's something that worries me.
You can't do that with Act 60 in the days when there was a general fund transfer. And there was a legal requirement that there was I think it was an annual inflator to transfer from the general fund. So we can do and by future legislatures. And
Right.
if the economy crashes and burns, then there's some really painful decisions, but we can write that in. No systems. We want to mess it up, we can mess it up. Senator Chittenden.
To your concern, Mr. Gilbert, that in the future legislature, 4 years, 6 years from now, if a bunch of legislators run on the fact that property taxes are too high, we're going to lower education spending, and then they get in here and they set that amount lower, that will really result in what I think you spoke to, which is really hard cuts when the school boards just don't get the money. If that scenario were to occur, and I do think it's feasible because people vote with their pocketbook issues. Do you not agree? And I personally have this opinion, but I'd love to hear your thoughts that the supplemental district spending 10% is a way to hedge against that risk, and that if that future legislature were to just lower that spending amount, reducing the foundation amount, that at least enabling or allowing for that additional spending above the amount gives agency to the voters to adjust accordingly in those future years?
I think you can do that, but I don't think it will pass the equity test. And certainly the way, if I can understand what you've been talking about when I first arrived and whatnot, the problem is that the Brigham decision says very clearly that students or towns must have equal access to the resources to get a good education that would fit the state. If you can show that there are places where there is not the same access to excess spending money, that's a problem. And what a lot of people have been trying to deal with, I think, in the last couple of years is, well, Brigham says substantial effort, and it says you can't get it exactly to the penny as to how much beyond under whatever people should be spending. But I think really what the court was saying in that decision was, look, we are never, ever going to be able to come right to the penny, the final penny, where everybody is getting the same money is going to schools at exactly a penny rate. But we have to be serious about this. And our goal is to be totally 100% equity. And when the government starts to give people the ability and the permission to start getting money on their own from their own property tax base, which might be a very rich one, people in poor towns that don't have that property tax base are really that's no longer equity. And that's why I think what the House has done in 454 with the excess spending, the way that everybody has to start out as being the poorest town in the state. They've used that analogy. It's true. You are going to be the poorest town if you want to spend more than the base amount that everybody's getting. And I think it's a fair way to go about it because it does represent taking the money from where the money is, taking the wealth from where the money is. And that, in my mind, it's the fair way that taxes should be assessed.
This two wealths playing here. We did the property value in 60. We didn't account for the financial wealth of the communities. It's taken me a while to figure out that I now have Stowe. Only 23% of their population is full-time. So that's 23%. And they really don't. Their non-homestead people pay a flat rate, so they don't go up. They can't pass school bond to do, they've got a leaky roof, and I'm told there's no latches on bathroom doors. But the town can't pass a bond either to pave the road because that number of people within what is a very property-rich town, even though they can draw from all that property value to pave their roads, they are feeling so stressed they can't pass a bond. And so there's two kinds of wealth that, and that's where this new inequity has come from, is that financially poor towns, not having nothing to do with their property wealth, but towns that the people in it are poor, cannot absorb a penny on the tax rate the way a town that might not be property rich or might, yeah, it might be a property poor town. But people in it are rich. You know, I think we're trying to balance out that other inequity, is the financial, and it's getting worse because more and more of us, our demographics are changing, and more of us are living on a fixed income, which may be going up or probably going down this week. And
It's okay, we went up again this afternoon.
Oh, we're up again this afternoon. I can look.
1.2.
But our property values are going up. And so the taxes are going up, but the financial wealth isn't. So there's a whole lot of inequities that have come into the system. And it's going to be challenging.
And either fortunately or unfortunately, the state is it's the state's responsibility to make sure the kids get equal opportunity. And it's we're one of the few states that has a commitment like that. I don't know if you knew the history of the common benefit clause, but common benefit clause, and I think also the requirement that every town has to have a school, actually came from the Pennsylvania Constitution. And when Vermont was trying to become a state in 1778, 79, the first thing they were told to do when they showed up at the Congress was, well, you have to have some sort of articles that will show what you're trying to do here. You have to have a constitution of some sort. And the Vermont people said, how do we do that? And they said, well, you might want to look at the Pennsylvania one because it's the most progressive, and Vermont was looking for. Even then, it was considered a progressive constitutional model. And so the Vermont Constitution, if you look at it and the Pennsylvania Constitution of that time, they are almost exactly the same, word for word. I mean, it's unbelievable. And a lot of the sections in the Pennsylvania Constitution actually came from George Mason. So Mason wanted to, you can sort of blame or give credit to for some of the things we're dealing with now. But Vermont was really, and the other thing that's important to understand is that even though the Pennsylvania and the Vermont constitutions were almost exactly the same, they're radically different now. And that's because Vermont, as you probably all know, we hardly ever amend our constitution, at least to a very different way. And that's not been true of most other states, including Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Constitution has been rewritten, I think, 3 or 4 major times. And about 5 years ago, there was a claim in Pennsylvania brought along the very same lines that the Brigham litigation was brought. And it went to court, and the same results came from that court. It said, look, you have to have their education language is different than what ours is, what theirs was. But they are now, Pennsylvania is now going through, they've had a foundation formula finance system for a number of years, and they're trying to use that to get equity back, and they can't do it, and they can sue it again second time under a group that's done a lot of study about the difference in opportunity for kids in cities versus rural areas and kids who are Black or Latino and kids who are white. I mean, it's really difficult to sort this out after a while. How you can deliver equity when there's a mandate to deliver equity. Well, that's kind of what we're facing here. It's hard.
Any other questions for Al?
Just one more if I could.
Yeah.
You did comment on the notion that's percolating regarding district consolidation. Do you have
Yeah.
district consolidation? I didn't see that in your testimony. Do you have thoughts on what's being contemplated?
You know, I have a lot of thoughts about that, and I purposely didn't put anything about that in here because that's a whole nother. I mean, I think the op-ed that Doug Racine had about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago is really right. But the main problem that we have right now is a money problem. It's finance. And it's not so much how the schools themselves are operating, it's just how the money is flowing in and out and how it's being used, distributed, or whatever. I think if that really is true, I think it is, or at least it's certainly true that the money, the financial challenge is much greater, it's more imminent. I think what I would do is I would focus on money this year, and maybe starting next year, I would begin to work on reconfiguration of schools and districts, because I think doing even a 10 or 15 district state school system is going to be very, very hard. It's going to be difficult for people to accept. So I think you're going to really get beat up if you take on both money and closing schools or changing schools and having 5 districts, because those are really, really big efforts that are the very things, money and schools are 2 things that will raise happiness among people more than anything else.
I always said school board was the one place I didn't want to be. I just get between people and their money right now. Get between people, their money, and their kids is just high. It gets to be highly emotional and just very, very difficult. I think the plan is, no, there won't be a map done this year. We will get the base financial structure set. The bill to date doesn't call for closing any schools. There's something called the future state that we are moving towards, that will see larger middle schools. We'll have the smaller local, we can have 4 kids in a kindergarten, I doubt. But there will be smaller local schools, and there seems vision is that might happen organically. That if you've got your foundation formula and you can't survive on that, then maybe your 4 kids and 4 kids 10 miles down the pavement,
You're going to have to do something.
Yeah, we'll go there, but that's in the future.
Well, I think I've heard, and I certainly have personally experienced places where I think people are very close to making that change to consolidation on their own, not being pushed there. And U32 and my feeling are probably the best examples.
You're working?
I mean, I was going to bring my folder full of the history of how U32 and my feeling have never been able to have one high school.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable.
It's
like this.
But there was a proposal to merge or to close Worcester last year with Doty, which is not that, probably closer to Worcester than some towns in its district. And the uproar from the public was substantial to the point where the school board backed off. And I've come to the conclusion that it's really not fair to ask locally elected school boards to do something that their friends and neighbors are not going to speak to them over.
Right.
I'm going to read the civil unions proclamation at the end of this week. And that was one where we had a Supreme Court mandate. We had to do something, but many of us have friends and neighbors that didn't talk to us for a long time. And for some, there were just completely ruptured relationships, and that was painful. And I think I would do anything possible to keep a local volunteer school board from having to do that.
Thank you so much. This is more a comment than a question, but we also have situations in our state where, like a district over from my district, small town, school population is shrinking, so very small school. The district is contemplating closing the school. The folks in the town don't want to lose the school, and yet they voted against adding a municipal sewer that would have allowed them to grow their grant list and potentially add some housing. And so at some point, what do we do as a legislature? Where do we force the issue? Yeah, I mean, this is part of the reason why costs are so high. And spending, continues to go up,
We
so.
lost 40,000 students in the last 20 years. And we still have essentially the same infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we don't have the housing anymore. I mean, some of us could all die off and that might help.
So, but I'm not sure getting rid of the S fund, to your point, I'm not sure getting rid of our current funding formula is the answer. It seems like there are a lot of problems and they need to be fixed in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think 454 comes close to being possibly able to do that from all the proposals that I've seen. And if I deliver one, I'm going to live with that.
But the worry that you bring up about the underfunding of a foundation formula is real, and it's like you said, it plays out all over the country, so.
Yeah, I don't plan to move to Florida yet. I'm around and like to stay too much. I don't want to see things fall apart.
We laid off, the NEA was in here, we laid off 400 teachers trying to get the budgets through this year. The 18%, it's reached the point where some of our friends and neighbors are not going to be able to afford to live in our town with our schools. And I think we knew this was coming. We tried 46, it didn't work. But there's an emotional attachment and then there's a financial reality. And the question is, and then there's the kids in the village who all want to do the best for it. And
Well, and I think actually those kids could be the real saviors of this whole thing, because tech is really important. And we've neglected that for many years. And we should, if we had to redistrict, I would redistrict around tech district.
Yeah.
And I would focus on getting good education for those kids who I think actually, a lot of them would have to have a combination of traditional academic learning as they get higher up in the grade and tech.
We should be integrating tech more into our traditional
every
education.
kid should get robotics.
I mean, tech is no longer what tech used to be.
No.
It's more than just numbers and size. It's pretty complicated.
It's white collar anymore.
Plus, there's nothing wrong with shop.
Okay, we're gonna have to move this along, since I told the secretary's office we would vote this bill out at 8:30.
Okay. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Al.
I appreciate it. I like watching you on TV, by the way.
No,
I feel like I know you.
for some reason, anyone that can sit through the commission meetings, and you seem to be there.
Now there,
You might have been watching us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, committee, we have one vote, which is H 96, an act relating to increasing the monetary thresholds for the certificate of need. We're here because by reducing that, we could reduce the number that are going through the Green Mountain Care Board, thus we could reduce the fee revenue to the Green Mountain Care Board. They have said it's not a problem for them. They're gonna have fewer to do so and it will cost less. And unless I've let it percolate, no one has come to me in the last 24, 48 hours. This is a health and welfare bill. And I know going for several times, once it did not make it through this committee. The requirement for certificate of need for burning centers was a deterrent because these are small. And so yes,
I move that our committee vote favorably draft number 1.3 of H96 from 4/8/2025. Yeah, I think that's right.
I think you got it.
I think I got it.
It's not amended.
As presented, we're not amending it.
No, this is as the bill, it's as it came, as it was sent to us, if it came out of the mouth. Okay, is there any further discussion? I'm not seeing it.
Excuse me, thank you.
Was that a discussion?
No, it was just a statement.
Okay, clerk will call the rolls.
Senator TC,
Yes.
Senator Brown,
Yes.
Senator Hewlett,
Getting better, yes.
get every time. Senator Beck, Senator Hardy,
Yes.
Senator Maddows, yes. Senator Cummings,
Yes,
7-0-0.
700. Senator, would you report this?
Thank you.
Are you
Yes.
reporting it for health and welfare?
No, I don't think so.
Is Ginny?
Jimmy.
Okay. You could just tell them who your turn.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Is- You get a copy of that, we will take it, you can take it up to the clerk's office unless they are they probably are watching.
Yeah.
Won't be down, but get it ready to go and take it out.
Sounds good.
That is it on the agenda, except for the committee discussion, which we've been engaging in. I'm trying to find out, we've asked Julia, I believe, see if we can convert Senator Beck is interested in staying with the present weights. But
No,
no,
I was just thinking of Senator Chitten's idea in the context of current school districts and homestead grant installing.
no, we're talking about the foundation formula and Tammy Colby's weights. And the other day he said to go to a whole new system of weights would be disruptive. And we wanted to see if we couldn't keep the present rates, but convert the taxing capacity to dollars. If you backed off on that one?
No, but I think we actually might, because of the work that's going on in the other committee, I think we might have information after there too.
Okay,
I think they're working on this.
Yeah, why-
on there.
I have been told that bill will be voted out. We should have it like May 2nd.
Yeah, I think that's their plan.
That is the plan. We will have it for 2 weeks.
May 2nd.
Pardon?
May 2nd?
May 2nd.
Like tomorrow.
The goal is to get out by Memorial Day.
Hey,
That's the goal.
so you guys do.
So we will have that bill. I'm told that will have the foundation formula going in for FY 28
I think that's their
as
plan.
opposed to, was it 29 or 30?
I think the conversation is 20.
Yeah, right now, but I think the bill as it came out of the House later.
Yeah,
think it was-
it was far beyond that. It was 30 or 31 or something. Something like that.
And not the other question. Because we've got two sets of numbers. One is the evidence-based, which is future state, which envisions more efficient, more consolidated, at least at the governance, and then moving towards high schools, middle schools. And I think at the elementary schools, it's going to be very organic. That's the thought. It's known that we are not, I have yet to see a breakout as to how savings are envisioned. I don't think anyone thinks we're going to make a transition without some money. I find the concept of the house yield and putting the money into the school construction plan, just I can see a lot of pushback coming from wealthier districts that are going to be charged to do that, but I still think we need to have some state good faith money going in there. But I don't know where it's.
We all share the burden of construction costs now.
Yeah.
So,
But we don't, I mean. Yes, your school is, as you pay off your bond, that goes into total ed funding and everybody's tax rate. It's being adjusted. And if there is a state. There used to be a state approval process, when we were putting bonded state money in. So if there is, because the thing that got everybody's attention was South Burlington's, well, I think it was South Burlington, for an athletic facility. And we had, the places with the leaky roofs that were getting a little concerned about that. Fortunately, your voters saw the light. We didn't have to deal with it, but we've known for a while that that could be an issue. So, think about it. Trying to do as much background. I'm looking for background that people like. Yeah.
sorry,
I'm sure you have this on your radar, but I remember Chair Kornheiser mentioning how they did put a maximum property value. Actually, just starting just to pick that up.
Well, for the inference, guys,
Income sensitive, we will take that up. Okay, so I will get that on for next.
the property
week.
value section.
And we haven't looked at the statewide appraisal, I gather, Jill, is something about school vacation. We seem to be losing, we haven't picked up as many kids as we used to during spring. But we will look more at that.
I'm just wondering your intentions for the bill coming over from the House or from the Senate Education Committee, based on what I understand, just what I heard, although I don't quite understand what they're doing. I think if they're making those kinds of changes to the foundation formula, it's extremely problematic. And so are we going to have the opportunity to change what they do, or are we gonna have to stay?
No,
with what
we
they
have the bill.
do? Okay,
I'm gonna.
so it's not like
focus
what
on-
they do is not part of our conversation. Okay,
No, I would try and limit us to our area of responsibility.
but it sounds like they're going
Yeah,
outside of their
they-
area of
yeah.
responsibility. They're
will
messing with the formula.
Definitely, no. We will definitely be looking at that.
my question was similar to Senator Hurry's. I was kind of hoping Senator Beck would be here. It seems as though some people know what is happening and what's gonna be coming to us, and
Well, there's a meeting of the chairs and the party leaders in the governor's office. It is a meeting called by the governor just to keep track, so everybody knows what's
so can we
moving.
learn more about what we will be getting on May 2nd? What,
It, Ledge Council said this was being drafted for it was being drafted and they did feel, because Joy, the money chairs asked it, and they said it needed to be public. I don't know what's in it. I've been told a more streamlined version. That's all I know. Once it is public, it is presented to the committee that it's public and we can read it and we can know what it is. And we can be doing some, some background testimony to,
Is it public over there? I mean, are they?
they don't have it
they
yet.
don't have-
It has not.
So who's developing it for them if the committee doesn't know
Yeah,
what
let's
it's
do
doing?
The chair it's been having, as the committee discussion goes, is my understanding, he is having a bill drafted that the committee will then mark up
So
based on committee discussion and 454.
is it a strike all?
I assume that it is, but it is following the same basic foundation formula. But that's all I know. I can only tell you what I know. Once it's public, we'll all know what it
Well,
is.
2 weeks isn't enough for us to look at that bill and really get
It's all
into it.
they've got.
I'm not leaving, I'll stay. I'm not
Okay,
okay, but leave here. I'll stay until we get it done.
We will
But
get it
that's,
done.
Could be given 2 weeks.
They're only being given 2 weeks.
No, the next
No,
week
it
is the
sounds like
third week.
he's
This week
working
is
on it.
week 2. They got it last week. This is their second week. They're getting 3 weeks.
I think he's planning on voting it out. A second.
Yeah,
Okay,
last week was their first week. This is their second week. Next week will be
Okay.
their third week.
I
I
will
just,
vote that.
not liking the lack of public.
Yeah, and they're going way beyond their jurisdiction if they're messing with the formula. That is finance.
We will pledge a formula and we will look at everything else in there. Okay, I don't hold this. And we'll take the time we need. All right. I think I've lost half my committee to the governor's office. Probably time we should